Now, the Prime Minister is going to water down the ban on sale of petrol and diesel vehicles in the wake of the tariffs.
That's right. It will move now. This is going to be the ban, of course, move from 2030 to 2035 on all forms of hybrid car, not just the plug-in hybrids, and they will be available until 2035. So
a bit of good news for white van men and women. Let's talk to the former Transport Minister, Norman Baker, who joins us now. Norman, it strikes me that this is just fiddling a bit, really. How much this will make very little impact on for instance, Jaguar Land Rover that have suspended sales to America.
Well, I think it's intellectually incoherent, as a matter of fact, because it's predicated on the relationship between petrol car sales and electric car sales, and that to some extent, to a large extent in fact, is out of the control of the manufacturers. And what the government should be doing if they want to promote the sale of electric vehicles, in my view, is providing incentives for people to buy the electric vehicles by having a discount. Now, what you could do, in particularly in this new world we're in of tariffs and so on, is actually provide a discount for electric vehicles made in this country to support British manufacturing, so that people buy one that's made here, they will actually get a discount. Unfortunately, what's happening is people aren't particularly buying them, and because people dislike Elon Musk so much and Tesla, sales are likely to go down rather than up. So, tying the manufacturers into the wider picture is not actually going to be very helpful, and they can't actually solve the matter that way.
Come on, Norman. I mean, the problem in this country, people not buying electric cars, is not because they don't like Elon Musk. It's because they don't like electric cars, frankly. I spend most of the time trying to find my phone charger. I don't want to spend the rest of the day trying to find a car charger. The infrastructure is not there. We're not ready for the electric cars. They depreciate badly. This whole thing needs ripping up, not just kicking it till 2035.
Well, people don't like Elon Musk and they don't like electric cars particularly. So both those factors play in. And as far as the charging system is concerned, I looked at this because this was in my portfolio back in 2013. And I recognised at the time you need to provide the infrastructure first in order to give people confidence about purchasing these vehicles, because the greatest barrier to purchase is actually people's fear of the electric vehicle running out of charge while they're on the motorway. That's actually the biggest obstacle to people buying electric cars. So if you can give people confidence that the structure is in place with charging points and they won't run out, and actually the cars have got further capacity these days, the batteries have improved, then that will do a long way to encourage people to buy the cars.
How are you going to encourage people, particularly women, Norman, to buy an electric car in the countryside if they live in a deep rural part of England, Scotland, Northern Ireland or Wales?
Well, indeed, and that's a particular problem. And what you're seeing, if you look at the map of where the charging points are, you'll find that some of the country is very well served by charging points, and other bits of the country have got big gaps, huge gaps where there are no charging points. And this is a failure of government. What I recognise as my Transport Minister, we need to have an even spread of charging points to pick up that very point, Andrew, and it's not being carried through. It's been left to the market largely to decide where charging points go. And of course, what the market's done quite sensibly from a market point of view is put them where the populations are. But it does mean if you're in a lower population area, then you're unlikely to be served by a charging point.
But it's also, Norman, it's a massive scam, because everybody was told, buy an electric car, you won't have to pay vehicle tax. There's your incentive. Well, guess what? Then, in the budget in 2024, Rachel Reeves said, I'm really sorry, you are going to have to pay vehicle tax now with your electric car. People aren't stupid. They see this manipulation coming a mile off.
Well, I have to say that the Treasury over at least a couple of decades has failed to anticipate the move from petrol and diesel to electric. And the Chancellor gets billions, I think it's about 35 billion a year from fuel duty and the VAT on fuel duty. And of course, as petrol and diesel vehicles disappear, that 35 billion will disappear as well. So there is a need to find a way to replace that. And the government has said, going back some years, that the amount of charge for motorists has to remain roughly the same, which inevitably means putting a charge on those who use electric vehicles.
Norman, just very briefly, the only political leader who is calling most vigorously for retaliation against Trump isn't Farage, it isn't the Prime Minister, it isn't the Tory leader, it is your leader, Ed Davey. Is he right?
Well, I'm not here as a Lib Dem this morning, Andrew, as you'll appreciate, notwithstanding my yellow shirt. But I think there is I'm not clear in my own mind what the best policy is. I mean, clearly retaliation increases tariffs and therefore makes the situation potentially worse. On the other hand, putting tariffs on across the board will affect British industry, and there has to be an answer to that. I think part of the answer has to be for the UK government to reach out to other countries who are prepared to do free trade deals without tariffs, including the EU, including Australia, Canada, and other such countries, and try and find alternative sources where we can put our exports. That's got to be part of the strategy. That's a strategy that Mark Carney is following in Canada, quite rightly, I think.
All right, thank you, Norman. Norman Baker there. Let us know your thoughts this morning. And what really winds me up about this car thing is taking away choice. I don't want an electric car. I just don't. You told me I had to buy a diesel. I bought a diesel.
And that went wrong. So just let us drive our cars. I know.
We are joined now by the Head of Communications at Popcon, Annunziata Rees-Mogg, and former Labour advisor Matthew Talbot in the studio. Right, Annunziata, do you want to start on these green rules relaxed to protect the car industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a prime example of quite how bad this government's green policies are and how damaging they are to the economy. That the moment there's a bump in the road, they have to be changed because otherwise companies will go bankrupt, people will lose their jobs. But simultaneously, people can't afford to buy the clean, green cars the government want them to buy. That this is just making everything more expensive and less saleable.
It's the right thing to do, though, isn't it? Because it's ridiculous to be getting rid of diesel and petrol cars.
I think so, and I think you have to bring people to this gradually, as much as climate change is an obvious and real issue. 20% of vehicles were heading to America before these tariffs. Actually, the criticism I'd have is we're just totally impotent as a country. You know, I'd like to congratulate the Prime Minister of the UK, Donald Trump, because anything he does just totally dictates the rest of our policy.
Inevitably, the US is 25% of the global economy. The fact that the other developed countries used to be 70% and are now only 40% is not America's fault. It's our fault for, whilst we're in the EU, over-regulating, stopping growth happening at a comparable speed and making sure that we couldn't benefit from global growth. What we need to do is relax all these regulations so that we can grow and stop relying on dirty fuel from China and Chinese labour to produce the goods we so happily use.
Well, that's going to be Great British Energy, right? We're going to have our own energy.
They're not producing anything at all. Yet another Quango. We've got a headline today saying Labour want to scrap loads of Quangos, 300 under review, potentially. And yet all they do is launch new ones. It's been nearly one a week.
I don't know if
new Quango a week since they came to power. That is extraordinary and a waste of government, taxpayer money.
It's over-reliance on the EU and not the selling off of much of industry in the 80s, and therefore this necessitation of globalisation and cheap immigration and all the rest of it. We have a service-based economy now of 97%. It's ridiculous.
Tony Blair absolutely bought into this idea that if you ship in cheap labour, you can prop up an economy that isn't otherwise growing very well. What it actually does is cut UK workers' wages by importing cheaper labour and produce a false growth because it's only growth in GDP terms, not per capita. So none of us are better off.
But Matthew, if you're worrying about your job in the car industry, 25% tariffs, the Primes are fiddling around with dates from 2030, moving from 2035 to 2030, the transition from petrol to electric. How does that help you if you're working in the car industry in the West Midlands today? It doesn't. And actually, what would really help is if they abandoned this madness by whacking companies with taxes, which is really going to hurt businesses. And we saw it, there's a survey in one of the papers today, in all of the papers today, companies are losing, is it a worker every 9 minutes? Because they can't afford to pay them.
Well, no, and the West Midlands will know themselves about what it's like when corporations pull out because of certain things, the amount of industry that used to be there. I think I'm not against necessarily, it's not really my hobby horse, but sort of the green agenda as such and moving to a just transition. I suppose there has to be a greater emphasis on the retraining of people within those industries, specifically car mechanics and other people, to get used to electric vehicles as opposed to petrol. If there's going to be a phased sort of transition, therefore you've got the time to retrain these sorts of people and re-industrialising, sort of, for want of a better word, for different car manufacturers, I'd say. So I'm not against it, but I think it's maybe it could be better thought out.